3, 2.
For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death if you are unvaccinated. That's President Joe Biden. The viral surge is coming. I think, though, the president just doesn't get it. It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, I'm Rob Nelson. I used to host a show on Fox, and now I do a digital live stream called That Rob Nelson Live. And my whole mission is to figure out how, in this time of division, we can find common ground.
Speech, and they're not allowed to do that anymore.
I understand what it's up.
They be focused on rebuilding California.
Oh, it's so true. Come on. This is where this gets real. He says you're heading. I wouldn't want to be black and driving in a car. Right. Point there, right? Some of what's in this music, you can't sanitize it. All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. Rob Nelson Live. It's gonna be a shorter show tonight, but it's gonna be a power-packed one. And you know, it's Christmas, but we're talking about COVID. Seems like every Christmas we're talking about COVID. You know, I started out the tease, and I'm gonna repeat it. You know, last week, President Biden, came out and said this. He was talking about Omicron and the new variant, COVID variant. It's here now, and it's spreading, and it's going to increase. Okay, that's a fact. That's true. For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death if you're unvaccinated. For themselves, their families, and the hospitals will soon overwhelm. Wow, Merry Christmas to you too, America. So here's the thing, okay? Let's try and look at this rationally. It's so hard right now in the COVID. COVID has divided America like nothing else ever has. I mean, think about this. For a disease to divide on political lines is beyond absurd, but it has. And it's not just on political lines, but it really has. And when you poll Republicans, Democrats, I mean, their view of the disease, their view of the response to the disease is completely partisan. How is it even possible that a disease, something based in science, something that is based in science, by that I mean it is, you know, it's not man-made. Well, actually, this disease might be man-made, but I mean the joke on the Wuhan lab. But that a disease, something that is completely not fabricated by human beings. Again, I know you're going to go, no, it was in the Wuhan lab, but I'm saying what it did when a disease spreads has nothing to do with politics or one's politics. A pandemic spread across the world. There's no denying that. COVID spread across the world. It was a global pandemic. It killed millions of people. You know, it devastated. And I'm not talking about the policies for lockdowns or not lockdowns. Anybody who's a COVID denier, you know, again, I've got huge issues with how COVID has been handled, how this administration has handled it, how it's been politicized. The media is rolling it. But make no mistake, COVID was and is real. It was a deadly, deadly disease that swept across the globe. That's real. I've interviewed countless doctors, some of who, you know, we had Dr. Robert Malone on our show, one of the architects of the mRNA vaccine technology. I've interviewed people that have been blasted by the mainstream media and disbarred from social platforms for daring to speak a view that goes against the mainstream about vaccines. Every one of them will tell you COVID is real. You know, Dr. Pierre Kory, I've mentioned him before, one of the world's leading pulmonary intensive care specialists, and before the pandemic, highly credited as one of the world's leading pulmonary intensive care specialists. And again, COVID's a pulmonary disease, so he knows how this works. His textbook is one of the best-selling textbooks in medical schools around the world, won the British Medical Association President's Award a few years back, got blasted because he dared to say early treatments like ivermectin work. But Dr. Pierre Kory was in ERs in New York City. He's like, it's the most horrible, wicked disease I've ever seen. The tricks it plays on the human body are insane. He's like, it's a deadly, twisted, violent disease. That's true. How does a deadly, twisted, violent disease get divided on political lines? How is that even possible? Just marinate on that thought for a minute, that we've politicized a disease and its response. To some extent, both sides have politicized it. Donald Trump did his share to politicize this thing by dismissing it, by, making fun of it, right up even after he had it. It was disappointing. But at the same time, the other side has done equal, if not more damage, perhaps more at this point, in their insistent refusal to actually do what they say, which is consistently follow science. It's been just hyper politicized. And we all live in the middle of that. There's no accountability. Nobody says we did something, it didn't work. I get early on, people made decisions. They didn't know what to do. No one was sure how bad this would be. I know a guy here in Puerto Rico who was part of the Puerto Rico former intelligence officer, U.S. intelligence, who was asked by the Puerto Rican government to come in and help do worst case scenarios when the pandemic started. This guy's not a pro-vaxxer, pro-lockdown guy. The numbers they were looking at based on the studies they saw, they weren't sure. They weren't sure if this was going to just decimate populations. And at first they advocated for severe restrictions. I get that politicians made decisions early on based on imperfect information. But they've stuck to those decisions. They've stuck to those positions regardless of what happened, regardless of new science, regardless of new data. They've adamantly refused to go, maybe we were wrong. They just double, triple down on whatever they said. I get why we rushed to get a vaccine out. We needed a vaccine. It was important. Much of the world still could use a vaccine. But the vaccine they created was an imperfect vaccine, and there were flaws in it and problems in it. And rather than admit that, they just doubled down that the vaccine was the best thing ever. Oh, and it's been safely tested for what? For 3 months? No other drug that was so widely spread out in the world has ever been rushed through so quickly. I understand why they rushed, but acknowledge you rushed. Don't pretend you actually did all the studies you would do on a normal drug. To any drug, not just a drug that was going to be distributed like across the globe to as many people as possible. Don't pretend you tested pregnant women. They didn't start testing on pregnant women till about like 4 months ago, 5 months ago. There were no pregnant women in the early tests. And if you had pregnant women, you wouldn't know how it affected their pregnancies unless you tested them for 9 months. So don't pretend you tested that. Don't pretend you tested kids. Don't lie about what you did. Just own the truth, but they can't do that. And so they doubled down. So we got 1 jab and then 2 jabs. And now there's a booster jab. And there's another variant. Delta came. Now Omicron. Omicron is spreading. Omicron is spreading everywhere. It is rapidly spreading. That's not made up. It appears to be milder, but far more contagious and infectious. And what's their answer? Get another jab. Pfizer, we know our vaccine works. Get another one. Yet meanwhile, you have people who are vaccinated, double vaccinated, and triple vaccinated getting COVID, getting the Omicron variant. So again, how is get another shot the answer when you're getting vaccinated people are getting it? They call them breakthrough cases. They're no longer breakthrough cases. They're widespread. The pandemic spread is everywhere. Excuse me. I mean, you're seeing it, there's the high visibility things like Senator Warren, Senator Booker, both getting it. Each of them's had 3 shots. There was a surge at the White House. Press Secretary Psaki was asked about the Treasury Department and numerous other federal departments where there appear to be rapid spreading amongst highly vaccinated populations. The NFL teams all vaccinated, widespread. The Cleveland Browns Raiders games postponed. The Rockettes shutting down. Moulin Rouge shutting down. Show after show shutting down. Places shutting down. Why? Because the variant is spreading. It's spreading among vaccinated people from vaccinated people. Sure, it's spreading among unvaccinated too, but there's no question vaccinated people are getting and spreading COVID, the Omicron variant, at a rapid rate. The data shows that. Just looking around shows that. Highly vaccinated communities are having not a breakthrough case here or there, but massive spread. The vaccine isn't stopping the new variant, but their answer is get another shot, get another shot, get another shot. That's their answer. Not, is this working? And their answer is wear a mask. whether I'm wearing a mask makes sense or not. Again, I am not anti-mask or anti-vaccine. I'm vaccinated. I didn't get vaccinated because I was scared. I actually felt I'd be fine if I got it. I'll admit I got it largely because I just didn't want to deal with the hassle. And you can criticize me for that and say I shouldn't have copped to it. But I was like, okay, it's not worth it. And I wanted to be able to see members of my family who were concerned about it. I was okay making that choice, my personal choice. I got vaccinated. And I've had COVID. And I know many people who vaccinated had COVID. I know people who got COVID, got vaccinated, and then got COVID. Multiple people. And I wear a mask. And I'm happy to comply with mask mandates, and I always was. But to suggest they're doing what they're not doing is a lie, And I've interviewed people, and I've mentioned her before, like Dr. Monica Gandhi from UCSF, the head of infectious diseases there. She's liberal. She's on the COVID, was part of the COVID, Biden COVID summit. She's constantly on the American Medical Association's platform talking about the need for everyone to get vaccinated. She did some of the earliest mask research there was and is a huge advocate of mask wearing. And she told me on the record, she said, mask wearing has now become political. People are no longer following the science. She acknowledged it makes no sense to mask kids in school. She's like, kids are not spreaders. Masking kids is a psychological benefit for the teachers, she said. Now, she argued that might be okay because it got schools open, but she said it's not because it's stopping the spread in that setting. We just insist mask up everywhere. Mask up everywhere. Mask up on the plane, even though every airline has said the air on our planes, the quality of air, because of how fast we recirculate, is safer than any other indoor environment in the world. If you are sitting next to someone on a plane, they estimate it is like sitting 15 feet apart from somebody else, much farther than you need to be with a mask on. Yet you got to wear a mask as you sit scrunched next to somebody, there's no logic to it anymore. But what there is now a hyper politicized conflict. Jumping Jack Jumanji, yes, the stage is bigger than pro football, 100%. I use those examples though, because they're things we all see. And they were highly politicized and highly publicized, the push to vaccinate all players on sports teams. And yet every major sports league is having massive outbreaks across every league amongst highly vaccinated communities. And that's, again, my issue. Yet we push Biden's winter of death. I mean, that's just offensive on the face of it, Biden doesn't get it. Biden hasn't gotten a lot. Biden is the classic case of a leader who doesn't know how to lead. He just follows, reacts, and doubles down on whatever he has been following. It's like he's not a visionary. He's not adaptive. He literally, if you watch him throughout his presidency and throughout his career, he just doubles down. Doesn't matter if it's Afghanistan, COVID, the economy, the border, he just doubles down. It doesn't matter if it's not working. It doesn't matter if it's not working. He doubles down. He doubles down. Seriously doubtful. Fair point. But I will suggest, first of all, two things you said there. When did they suggest vaccines prevent you from getting COVID? Go back and do your homework. They suggested vaccines prevent you from getting COVID for quite a while until they realized they didn't. Early on, they thought the vaccines were highly effective at keeping you from getting COVID. And it's why they said there are very few cases of people getting COVID who are vaccinated. And until the more recent variants, that was true. And more recently, there were what they called breakthrough cases, meaning exceptional. A breakthrough case is rare. Now what we're seeing is it's not breakthrough cases anymore. It's a massive number of vaccinated people getting it. So to your first point, they absolutely did say that vaccines kept you from getting COVID. They've had to adapt that as they realize the vaccines aren't stopping the spread among the vaccinated. Instead of acknowledging that and saying, you know what, it's actually now really widespread, even with vaccinated people. Our vaccines aren't as effective. They just insist get another shot. That's my point. They absolutely said vaccines keep you from getting COVID. And at first they did. And then when they didn't, instead of admitting that, they just doubled down on get another shot of the vaccine. Get another shot of the vaccine. Do they keep you alive and out of hospitals? 100% seriously doubtful. 100%. I've said the whole time, I think vaccinated people are clearly going to suffer much less in terms of symptoms and much less in terms of hospitalizations and death. No question. That is the plus of the vaccine, is that it is keeping people healthier who are getting COVID. That said, It is also equally true, seriously doubtful, and again, earlier on, this was acknowledged. Dr. Fauci early on talked about people who get COVID will have natural immunity and be fine. They changed that stance. That's not science. It's science that natural immunity prevents you from getting it. They changed in the middle. Why did Dr. Fauci say natural immunity protects you from getting COVID? Because it's like immunology 101. Natural immunity is the strongest immunity to any disease, period. You get whatever it is and live. Your body creates the titanium protection against it. Why did he say that? Because he knew it was true. So why did he unsay it? Why did he say, well, it does, but we don't know how good? We don't know actually if it really does as much as we thought. We know the vaccines do. How about you just admit the vaccines have limited protection too? And natural immunity appears to be very strong protection. It may not be perfect protection. I know people who've gotten COVID twice. But that said, natural immunity is a very powerful protector as well. And if you were to get it again, would keep you from being hospitalized or dying. So the issue comes down to, if you're naturally immune because you had COVID, why should you have to get a vaccine? Probably 40 to 45% of the country, if not higher, has had COVID. Every one of those people will be safe if they get it again, with few exceptions. There's always an exception, hyperimmune compromised people. So why are you going to order them to get a vaccine? Why are you going to insist that getting a vaccine will solve the problem? It's the hypocrisy I have a problem with, seriously doubtful. It's the hypocrisy of not acknowledging and even owning what you said. I look back at clips from before. It doesn't matter where you look. You can go back to when Trump was president. Listen to everyone from Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, to Dr. Fauci, to countless pundits, scientists, doctors, people saying, I'm not going to trust the vaccine. People shouldn't just trust it. People should take their time. People should be careful. Don't just trust whatever the government tells you. Once Biden was president, it's like, trust us, it's good. It's the hypocrisy, the double standard I have a problem with, the lack of transparency. It's not whether or not people should be getting vaccinated. I think people who are hyperimmune compromised should be. I think elderly people should be. We know this disease kills people primarily who are older. That's still true. It's largely true. Look at the data. Not only, but that's who it primarily kills, and those who are sick. But let everyone else make a choice. Let those who are naturally immune not get vaccinated. Let those who are young and healthy make their own choice about whether they want to just get it and be okay, which 99.99% of them will be. It's the mandate, the ordering that I have a problem with. We're going to get into, in a minute, sort of what's happened. X86BSD, keep you out of hospitals, maybe. No, they do keep people out of hospitals. I think it's indisputable. They strengthen your immunity. The issue is what else they might do. You're pointing that out. And whether the shot has fatal side effects. And so I want to address that right now before we get to this timeline of events that Crafty's put together, what's going on in New York City. And I'm taking a pause in the middle to do this, and X86BSD, great point to do it from. There is a man, his name is Matt Mamoli. Matt Mamoli is the director of the Lab of Infectious Diseases, the Clinical Studies Unit at the National Institute of Health. I'm going to say that again so everybody gets it. He is the director of infectious disease clinical studies. That would be COVID trials at the National Institute of Health. That's not some random little sidebar organization. That's not some group formed on Facebook. That's the National Institute of Health. Matt Mamoli came out about a month and a half, 5 weeks ago, and said, I have serious problems with vaccine mandates. Serious concerns about vaccine mandates. Matt Mamoli is an anti-vaccine. Matt Mamoli is the director of the Infectious Disease Lab Clinical Studies at the National Institute of Health, where all this is being looked at and studied, where Dr. Fauci gets his info from. And he said, I have concerns. And the National Institute of Health did not tell him to go shut up. They didn't fire him. They didn't silence him. They did something far trickier. They asked him not to talk a lot to the press about it when it first broke, and the mainstream corporate media didn't really report it. And they said, instead, what we will do is we will do an NIH, National Institute of Health sponsored live stream about it. We will live stream you in a discussion with several other NIH, doctors about this topic so that people can hear, because it's legitimate dissent on your part. Now, the NIH wasn't stupid. I watched the live stream. Most of you probably don't even know it existed. You know what? 4,000 people. That's it. 4,000 people watched the live stream. That's it. That's it. Seriously? We got 4 times that many views when Dr. Malone came on. That's all the number of people who watched the live stream that the NIH agreed to do to let this out, knowing full well if they let him just run out to the press and go over and over, Joe Rogan and Fox News that have millions of people watching. Let's do a live stream so very few people can see it. But they didn't censor him. He's the head of infectious disease clinical studies at the National Institute of Health. You want to call him crazy? Want to say he doesn't know what he's talking about? Because he's running the studies. He's running the NIH's clinical studies of infectious diseases and vaccines. He's right there at the matrix of it all. Is he crazy? No, he had concerns. And here's what he said in his live stream. I'm going to summarize, and I recommend you go watch it. You can find it. It's online. It's not censored. YouTube didn't pull it down because it's the National Institute of Health. He said 3 things. He said 1, and these are, you can go listen to him say it. He said 1, we are seeing an equal spread of the disease from vaccinated people. We originally thought the vaccine would prevent the spread, not just the infection, but the spread. But in fact, vaccinated people shed the disease as much as unvaccinated. So being vaccinated or unvaccinated has no impact on whether you give the disease. Now, Dr. Fauci knows that. That's one of the reasons they get concerned and started telling people to mask up again, because they realize vaccinated people are giving the disease off to other people too. If they have it, they're giving it off. That was Dr. Mamoli's first point. His second point was, and this is the one the media has completely hidden, hospitalizations and deaths at this point are largely the same for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Oh my God, that's not true. You're going to tell me. I've heard everywhere. I've seen everywhere. Okay, you've heard everywhere. You've seen everywhere. Except the head of infectious disease clinical studies at the National Institute of Health, who if he was saying anything else, you'd be like, absolutely, gospel of truth, right? He's the archbishop right under Pope Fauci, said it's not true. Vaccinated and unvaccinated people overall, when you spread it out, now when you're looking at the data, because before you didn't have vaccination, are going to the hospital and dying at relatively similar numbers. And that the primary deaths are among people over 80. The older you are, the more likely, and those who are severely immunocompromised. He said, 1, vaccinated people spread as easily as unvaccinated. 2, vaccinated and unvaccinated people, both are going to the hospital, both are dying at about the same rate. And 3, he said, and this is going back to the point that was made earlier about the fatalness that one of our viewers made about the fatalness of the shot. He said, while the vaccines are largely safe, and again, I'm qualifying that by saying based on what they know and have tested, but he said, we haven't been able to test them for long enough. We tested in a short window. We haven't been able to have the long-term tests we would normally have. And while they appear relatively safe, I'm not saying we shouldn't put them in people. I'm speaking as him. We haven't tested long enough to know for sure long-term. And 2, the incidences of problems, health problems, risk, death, disease, side effects that are severe from the vaccines, while not super high, are 8 times higher than any other drug or vaccine we've ever used and authorized. 8 times higher. Head of infectious diseases clinical studies, NIH, says they're safe, yes, to the extent we know, we've tested, but there are issues and side effects and concerns, and they're 8 times more than anything else we've ever approved to put into people. That should scare you. Should it mean you shouldn't get a vaccine? Not necessarily. Should it mean you should ask questions? Yes. But his conclusion was what it should really mean when you combine that with equal numbers of hospitalizations and death for vaccinated and unvaccinated, and and vaccinated people spreading just as easily, his conclusion was the one thing we shouldn't do is mandate vaccines. Do not order people to get this vaccine. Let them make their own choice. There are enough variables to suggest it is, while a health interest to vaccinate a population, we should not be forcing that, given that there are legitimate concerns about the vaccine. There are things we don't know. We know vaccinated, unvaccinated people are getting sick and dying at the same rate, and we know vaccinated people are spreading at the same rate. So therefore, let people make their own choice, because it's a well-known medical thing that again has gotten brushed away. The whole Stockholm thing about the Geneva thing. Do not force someone to put something in their body. That is considered a human rights crime. Do not inject somebody with something they don't want. And Dr. Mamoli, head of infectious disease clinical studies in NIH, is saying, I'm not saying the vaccine's bad. I'm saying there are definite questions. We haven't had enough time. And based on the fact that vaccinated and unvaccinated get sick and die about the same, it's mostly older, sicker people who are going to be vaccinated. And healthy natural immunity people are largely going to be okay. Do not order people to get this vaccine. And that's where I have a problem. The problem that we have gone on a massive force you, order you, punish you, isolate you, shame you if you dare choose not to put that needle in your arm. 4,000 people watched that live stream. 4,000 people. How many of you get more than 4,000 views on something? But it was an NIH live stream. They didn't publicize it. They didn't promote it. They made sure the press didn't know a lot about it. But it's there for you to watch. And it's the National Institute of Health 3 weeks ago on their own live stream talking about we are holding this discussion to allow points of view that are legitimate that need to be heard. How many of you have heard that? Nope. And if you go to Fox News, you just hear it's all bad. And if you go to CNN, you just hear vax up, vax up, vax up, and take 4 shots, 5 shots. The problem I have is this monolithic mindset, myopic, if you will. Monolithic and myopic. Can those two go together? And what's happening now as a result, which brings us to what is happening in New York City. New York City is the epicenter of COVID breakout right now. One of the most highly vaccinated communities in America, if not the most, is having the worst breakouts. Now, again, most people aren't dying. Most people aren't going to the hospital. It's partly because they're vaccinated, partly because Omicron's not as severe. But the reality is you vaccinated that city up as much as you can, and people are getting Omicron and COVID like crazy. It's going everywhere. The response of the city and of the mayor is not to acknowledge that, not to acknowledge, well, vaccinated people are getting it because the vaccine clearly isn't that effective against it, but good for you. It's probably keeping you from getting as sick. Third booster shot's debatable, no idea. Let you make your own choices on this. They've gone double down. We are going to force you to get vaccinated. And here's an interview with the New York City Mayor Bill Blasio on CNN.
People want to lead their lives. I mean, the hard thing, I feel it here in New York City. Yeah. By the way, I'm from Philadelphia, so it's not like I live in a rural area. But I feel it in every block that I walk in New York City. But if I were in the middle part of the country with you, I don't think we'd see masks. I don't think we'd be showing our vax cards anywhere. So I come back to that point where unless everybody's on the same page in the country, we're kind of screwed.
And you know how you get on the same page? People have to lead. So look, I believe with enough leadership, enough mandates, we're going to get a hell of a lot more people vaccinated. The more people vaccinated, the more we actually make the transition to a time when COVID is in the background, not the foreground. And we know these mandates work, and we know people respond. Look, human beings are pretty predictable. If you say your paycheck depends on it, or your ability to enjoy life and go do the things you want to do, people will make the practical decision overwhelmingly, and they'll go get vaccinated. But we aren't pushing hard enough. We got to go farther.
Not pushing hard enough? First of all, he talks about leadership. I don't think what he's doing is leadership. It's fellowship. Not pushing hard enough. You know what? If you coerce people enough, if you make it hard enough, if you screw them over enough, they're going to do it. What happened to democracy, guys? And monkey arms. I rarely say someone's wrong, monkey arms. Good to see you, by the way. But put that up, Crafty. 99% of all ICU COVID patients. You are wrong, monkey arms. The data has been skewed. If it's true, if you go back earlier on, they're bringing data together from when people were mostly unvaccinated. I will simply refer you, Monkey Arms, not to me, but to Dr. Mark Maloney, Dr. Matt Mamoli, who is the director of the Lab of Infectious Diseases, the head of the clinical studies / trials unit at the National Institute of Health, who on a National Institute of Health live stream said, if you look at the data accurately, hospitalizations and deaths at this point among vaccinated and unvaccinated populations are relatively similar, slightly higher for unvaccinated. No one at the NIH said he was wrong. No one on the panel from the NIH said he was wrong. The NIH did not put out a disclaimer and say he is wrong, because he wasn't wrong, because he's got the data, because they are the National Institute of Health. They have the data. They're compiling the data. And that is simply a misinformation on the side that doesn't want to be misinformation, that it's all vaccinated, unvaccinated people who are getting sick and dying. It's just not true. It's just simply not true. Okay, to piece two of this. And again, I'm not anti-vax. I have the vaccine. I'm not anti-vax at all. I'm anti-vax mandate. And I'm severely anti-vax kids because we don't know enough about it. We know we know less than 500 kids in the last almost 2 years in the U.S. have died from COVID. Almost every one of them had serious compromising underlying conditions. That number is lower than the flu. And kids are healthy. Their immune systems are stronger than adults. They respond well to it. Studies have shown, talk to any ICU pediatric doctor, they will tell you kids don't spread this. Talk to any infectious disease expert. Talk to Monica Gandhi from UCSF. She will tell you kids don't spread this the way adults do. Kids handle it better than adults do. Don't vaccinate kids given that there are risks. There's no need. Your kids will be safe. Kids and mandates. That's where I draw my line. And this. So what happened next is over the weekend, 6 people are arrested in New York City at a cheesecake factory in Queens. 50 protesters go in, refuse to show their vax cards, sit down and won't leave. The cops come and start arresting people. Here's some footage.
Let me give her the charger. Let me give her the fucking charger. I'm on my life. That's it. My life. It's a lie. Oh, 9 a.m. Oh, yeah. Of course you're not trying to hurt me. You're just harassing me. You're not trying to hurt me. No, it's my job in the school system.
All right. So you guys get the point. The arrests go on. Thanks, Crafty. And then the next day, 4 more people arrested in an Applebee's nearby in Queens. Now, a couple sidebars, then I'm going to back up to something somebody posted. First of all, where's the outrage? No, not that, Crafty. Not yet. Oh, thanks. Okay. Where's the outrage, by the way? That's a black woman surrounded by white cops. I mean, where is the, I'm being facetious, but I'm pissed and annoyed. Where's the outrage? A bunch of white cops surrounding a black woman who's just in a restaurant and doesn't want to follow whatever rule they decided you had to follow. And she's saying, what are the charges? What are the charges? Right? Where's the outrage that a black woman's being arrested by white cops? None, of course. This one, we're silent. This isn't about race. The number of black Americans who will resist the vaccine is so high as a percentage of the population. And it's not just because they're dumb and don't know the data or haven't been given information. It's nothing to do with that. It's because they have concerns. They have historic concerns with how the U.S. government has handled medical testing, treatment, and vaccines within the black community. And they have a healthy skepticism about it. But we don't hear much about that healthy skepticism. It's in a lot of communities, but it's in a very high percentage in the black American community comparatively, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And that doesn't get a lot of press. But again, those people doing a sit-in, right, and are being arrested, again, for not having a vaccine card. At what point do you go, this isn't okay? And to back up for a second, Apprehensive Fly said, Rob, you're just wrong. The data show. I hate the data show. The data show. Do you want me to do a list of what the data show that people just don't want to talk about? Right? The data show all kinds of concerns and problems with the vaccine. You can go dig that up, but it's not out there for most people to see. I can give you reams of data. The data show that ivermectin works if it's in smaller clinical trials, not double-blind studies, because they haven't done a double-blind study, right? The data show that I can never say it. Heart problems from the vaccine among teenage boys is high.
Myocarditis.
Myocarditis. Thank you, Crafty. 6 times higher than whatever risk you're going to get from COVID. The data show that. That's why other countries, numerous other countries, said don't vaccinate teenage boys. Not that most kids are going to get myocarditis, but because it's 6 to 8 times higher than anything that's going to happen to them from COVID. The data show all kinds of things. So I hate the data show. But the fact is, the data don't show that. The data have been, and I'm not saying vaccinated people aren't suffering and weren't. But with Omicron especially, what we're seeing now as Delta and Omicron are moving in, is that the majority of people who are going to the hospital and suffering severe problems and death are pretty close. And again, don't believe me. Don't believe whatever data you looked at. Go to the NIH. I'll say it for the 100th time. Go watch the live stream that the NIH put out. Go look at Dr. Matt Mamoli's data, who is the head of infectious diseases, the clinical studies department. If you think his data is wrong, then you can go, he's wrong, the NIH is lying. But the data doesn't just show that. And the data has been so distorted. And to be honest, even if the data did show that, I don't care. If unvaccinated people want to take a risk and get sick, let them. The majority of unvaccinated people, if they are young, if they do not have immunocompromised issues, are going to be perfectly fine. That's the reality. That is the simple reality that we've known from the beginning. Young, healthy people rarely get severely sick or die from COVID. So the truth is, if an older unvaccinated person with an underlying health condition wants to take a risk and get COVID and die, let them. It's their friggin' choice. It's their frigging body. It's their right. They are not going to make anybody else sick and die. And why? Because they're not going to, if they're going to give it to a vaccinated person, that person's vaccinated, so they should be fine. And unvaccinated and vaccinated people give the disease off at the same rate. So it doesn't matter if I'm vaccinated or unvaccinated if you're vaccinated, because you are equally likely to get COVID from a vaccinated person as from an unvaccinated person. So my being unvaccinated only hurts me. Doesn't hurt anybody who's vaccinated, certainly no more than anybody else being around someone else who's vaccinated around vaccinated. See my point? Unvaccinated, vaccinated spread at the same rate. So if I'm unvaccinated, I'm only hurting myself. I'm not going to make a vaccinated person sick. And if I do, so would a vaccinated person could just as likely. And they're vaccinated, so they probably will be fine. So it's really me that's suffering. So if I want to suffer, let me suffer. This is not about stopping COVID. It's really not anymore. And I don't think it's just about abstract control. It's about doubling down on a political agenda that is starting to backfire. And that's where I'm going to end this. Joe Biden doesn't get it. Joe Biden just simply doesn't get that this agenda is backfiring. And people are getting tired. They're tired of the twisted, constantly changing information, of the lack of transparency, of the changing messaging, of the, get vaccinated, we'll all be fine. Oh, no, we're not fine. Get double vaccinated, you'll be fine. But don't be around people without masks on. But if you're vaccinated, maybe. But if you're unvaccinated, you're going to burn in hell. But by the way, let's not lock down, but let's make sure people don't go out. I mean, it's literally, they're all over the map with what they want people to do. They literally took a political approach like they did with Afghanistan, like they did with the border, like they did with inflation and jobs, and it's backfiring. And instead of just acknowledging it, they just double down on it. So now it's like, let's be harder on it. That's my issue. It's politicized. It's just politicized. It's not science anymore. Science would say, vaccinate people if they want to be vaccinated. The vaccine's debatably effective at this point, but it does provide safety and in terms of your, how badly you get it. It's apparently not really stopping a lot of people from getting it, but they're not getting as bad. And Omicron is not as severe. And honor natural immunity and let young, healthy people or people who've had COVID make their own choice. Their immunity, if they've had it, is powerful as a vaccine. And if they're young and healthy and want to get it, science would show they'll be fine. That would be following the science. Mask up when it's appropriate. That would be following the science. Don't wear a mask on an airplane where it's like you're being 15 feet away, but wear one if you're in a crowded, closed up room, like inside the White House press room or whatever. Sure, I guess that's science. This is politics. And it pisses me off that that's what we're doing, that that's what we're following, and that we're not following the science. We're following the politics. Again, on both sides. I admit, I said what happened in the first half of this story with Trump was not following the science either. And now we're just in a doubling down on the politics, and people are tired. People want answers. People want to get on with their lives. People are willing to live with this, knowing they'll be safe, and we're not letting them. We're going to arrest you in New York City. Really? That's the America you want to live in. And it's amazing how many people on the left, the far left, are really opposed to this because they distrust the government. It's amazing how many minority leaders and community members are against this. It's constantly a surprise to me, but not that that's the case, and the media doesn't report it. That's what's troubling. Big thanks to Crafty for pulling together the data and stuff on this. Crafty, before we jump off, just want to give you a second up here. I know you're a nurse, or were a nurse. I know this was something really important to you. You brought it up. You brought it, something you and I have talked about, but this really triggered you. And we only have a minute or two left. But Crafty, why did it bother you so much when you saw what was happening in New York? What pushed the button for you? You've seen a lot. Why this?
Well, we've talked about this before privately, you and I, and we notice these trends that come up before they actually occur. And so when we saw this happening in Australia, I was like, okay, the moment that some politician decides to take what's happening in Australia and try to apply it here to the States, they're going to use that as a precedent. Oh, hey, it worked effectively there. So I was like thinking, what if that happens here? They're going to use that as a positive case to reinforce their point. So I'm thinking maybe that's what's now starting to happen in New York because Australia was the test bed.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, and you guys, thanks for everybody engaging in this. And Monkey Arms, and I appreciate your comments. I didn't get to many of them, but I see them on the sidebar, and I see some of them now. And I just want to say, I am all for legitimate debate on this, guys. I don't have all the answers. I'm posing a position, a viewpoint. I've been clear where I come from. I'm against the mandates. I think the data has been scrambled and used selectively by both sides on this issue. And I think my biggest concern is that we get stuck in a no, I'm right. This is the way it is. I brought up Dr. Mamoli to make that point, to show that somebody high up in the NIH is expressing these same opinions and getting very little press. If Dr. Mamoli were getting plastered all over CNN going, here's a counter view from somebody very high up at NIH, just 2 steps under Dr. Fauci. Let's talk about that. I might have a different reaction. The fact that that gets suppressed or buried or hidden or underreported, the fact that most people out there, most of you don't know what Dr. Mamoli said, the guy who is the head of clinical studies at the National Institute of Health, that he said these numbers, that he said these data, that nobody argued he was wrong about them, that concerns me more than anything. Not that I have all the answers or that I'm 100% right, but I do have a viewpoint, and I think we need more viewpoints, and I think we need more discussion about this. So thanks, guys, for being part of it. Merry Christmas to everybody. I do not believe we are going to have a winter of death. I actually believe we're going to see our way through this. I'm not being a pearly-eyed optimist. Omicron is not as deadly. Many of us will get it. People will be okay. Those who are vaccinated will have a better protection from it. Go have a happy holiday. Live your life. Be with the people you love. It's too short not to. Thanks for watching.